I'm talking about the Orthoptics program. For those who don't know what Orthoptics is, in Liverpool terms, it means gaudy eyes. But we're training people to be orthoptists to look at eye misalignments and how the eyes work together. And uh, within our cohort of students, we have got a high proportion of Black, Asian, minority ethnic. And because I can't say that lots and lots of times, I'm just going to abbreviate that to BAME. Basically, what is the problem? It was brought to our attention a few years ago that there was a in 2018 in particular, there's a big attainment gap between the BAME students and the white students. This isn't unique to orthoptics by any stretch of the imagination. This is across HE. But in this particular year, it was particularly noticeable and because we've got such a high proportion of BAME students within orthoptics, certainly out of all the health sciences programs, we've got the highest rates. So we said, well, what's going on here? What do we need to be doing? Anything? How can we address this? So so you can see this one on the left here is looking at the rates of students who got a first. So the white cohort much higher than the BAME, about 30% difference. And again, the looking at the lower so 2-2 classification, there's still quite a gap. Yes, there's variation over the years, and it is complicated when we're looking at all of these things, trying to figure out what's going on. There are individual differences, but taking an average, looking across the years, and it is something that's still ongoing. So what can we do? First off, we thought, well, does our program reflect our student population, our patient population, the population of clinicians working in the NHS? So in terms of the data from the NHS, they group together orthoptics and optics, so it's a bit broader than just orthoptics, but 27% of the recent stats are BAME, and that is not currently reflected in our lecturing staff, but which obviously that's relatively fixed, that doesn't change a lot, but we use quite a few external lecturers doing clinical skills, all sorts of other things as well, is not reflected in that. It's not being reflected in our service users. So we're not looking at it from a patient perspective as well. So this, things like what we can do straight away is to improve the representation, the diversity, to ensure that there's the sense of belonging for students, but also to ensure that we're meeting the needs of the patient population. Looking at the content within the curriculum, obviously this is always an ongoing thing for any program. So it's anytime we're looking at changes, we're now flagging it up. Is there anything that needs to be changed in relation to diversity? And then looking at meeting students' needs. So considerations of culture and faith and religious observance. This is something we've always done, but I think in the last year, COVID and all the rest of it brought its own challenges. So we just had to sort of bring that back to the front, the forefront of our minds. Well, we wanted to look at, so the data I showed you at the start was from a couple of years ago. And what I thought, well, is it particular types of assessment? Are some groups of students better at doing exams or better at doing assignments? Is there a strength? Is there something that we could potentially target? So we looked at every single assessment across from 1920 across all 3 years. And there wasn't any pattern for exams having higher marks or assignments having higher marks. But there was 2 particular modules in this year where the average marks were about 20% lower in the BAME students. And for the 2 modules in question were both year 2 and they're both research modules. So I thought, well, what's going on there? Is it a trend across other years? So we went back to the 1819 and to the 2021. And the answer was no, it wasn't something about the year 2 modules. So is it something specific to this cohort? So we looked at the year 3 dissertation module for the same cohort from 1920. They've obviously just done their dissertation this year. And so it does seem to be that particular cohort, because the dissertation marks were about 15% lower on average. So it's not that as a particular type of assessment or a particular module. It's just more complicated. It gets more complicated by the minute, basically. So what do our students think? Well, obviously we can look at the content, we can, look at what we think, but essentially we need to know the students' views as well. So we did an online questionnaire and with a series of questions, and they were grouped into engagement, belongingness, self-confidence, and the inclusivity of curriculum, not just specifically related to ethnicity. We also asked about sexuality and other aspects. We had 84 responses out of about 110 students. And we, so those questions were Likert scale, so strongly agree to strongly disagree. And so we just started off the easy bit using the numbers and looked at, was there any differences by the ethnicity, gender, age, sexuality, whether the student has a student support document, so some sort of disability, first to attend university in their family, or their year of study. And essentially there was just the odd thing that came out statistically significant, but there wasn't any sort of major findings from this. And we're like, okay, so we're still sort of trying to figure out what's going on here. Give them lots of chances for free text responses as well. I've obviously just picked out just a few. There were positive and negative. In terms of the generic comments, so this one, I feel I contribute quite a lot to discussions, but many others do not, yet are not prompted to speak or contribute, which is very frustrating. Being one of the only ones to contribute, especially when in smaller groups, makes it uncomfortable as you feel a lot more pressure. And so, yeah, there was some comments like that, which just seemed to be about students in general. Then someone said, I can't see myself confidently knowing enough to do well in placement and final clinical exams. So, but obviously some of this now is compounded with COVID as well. But there were some comments that came out specifically related to ethnicity. And I thought this first one's particularly insightful. Language like redness is used in ophthalmic conditions modules. This clearly isn't the case in non-white patients. If a condition is being discussed, we should get pictures showing how it presents in both white and non-white patients. I mean, it kind of struck me, there was an article in the news a couple of weeks ago about patients, non-white patients who were getting their bed sores and ulcers weren't being picked up until later because the scales on which they were being judged, the nursing, were looking at sort of redness, and it doesn't apply to certain populations. Obviously, that's not something specific to eyes, but it sort of really sort of made the point very clear to me. I thought, you're right. And then someone else said, I do feel due to the wide diversity on this course, certain lecturers would feel uncomfortable or under pressure to say the right thing. So we also obviously have to address that, their belongingness. If they're feeling that, oh, we're not like, we'd feel uncomfortable, or their perception is that we'd feel uncomfortable, then that needs addressing. But overall, in terms of the free text comments, there was a lot more free text comments from the white students. So again, I think just holding back, is there some information we're not getting here? Okay, so what have we done so far? Well, to increase the diversity of the people involved in teaching, we've already, we've had it. We looked at this a year ago, so we've already made some changes to making sure we are representative of the profession, student body, and service users. Exploring actions to decolonize the content of the curricula so it's not Eurocentric. Basically, it just goes back to that comment about the redness in the eyes. So making sure it's not just about white patients, fine conditions in white patients, and making sure it's applicable to our patient population. Things that we've put it on student forum as a standing agenda item, making sure that the students feel they have the opportunity to give their opinions and have a voice. We always had the opportunity, but we never made it explicit before. And trying to be proactive rather than reactive. So now, again, looking back at dates for religious festivals where we can minimise teaching or assessment if it's possible. And, again, asking the students, are there days, times when there may be some factor that impacts on your learning and teaching? Is there some way that we can work together on that? And also other plans for next year. We would be fortunate to be awarded a University of Liverpool Student Success Innovation Fund grant. And what we're doing in this, we've got two components. The first one, we're going to be doing focus groups with the BAME students to build on. So looking at those questionnaires, there's lots of things it does tell us, but it also raise a whole load more questions. So we're going to feed them. So a little bit of bribery, hopefully engage them within the sessions. And so small groups, about 8 students in first, second, and third year, and trying to expand on what we've learned from the questionnaire and try and figure out any other ways that we can support students. And the second part of this grant is also to enhance the inclusive curriculum. So we are going to be interviewing some graduates. So one's a brand new graduate, and one is in a leadership role now in a hospital, and another one is taking on an extended role. So we've got some role models, aspirational models. We're going to be interviewing about content relating to the curriculum. So it'll be able to embed content within a range of modules, and for admissions purposes as well, and some clinical skills. So that'll be happening in September. Okay, so just in summary, moving forward. So this is, yes, we identified a problem. We're not solving this overnight, and it's incredibly complex. But we have made some changes to our teaching. The people involved, the external lecturers, service users, changes to the curriculum, and down to even basic things like the images we used. When I was putting this together, one of the other team members, I was using stock images that we have, because obviously copyright, I want to make sure we're using our own images. All the images, the eyes that I had were all white. They were all blue eyes. And I thought, these are stock images we've built up over the time. I thought, you're right. I hadn't even noticed that. So it's making sure that we, all our resources are representative. Making sure we involve the students. It's not just us saying, well, we'll do this differently then, the focus groups, and making sure that we use the existing mechanisms that we already have for the students to be engaged in that process. And obviously, with making changes, we need to sort of keep evaluating, saying, well, are these changes resulting in improvements, whether that's in attainment or just the perceptions or the students' sense of belonging, how they're engaging with the program and they're enjoying it. So, thank you very much for listening.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Anna. So again, opportunity for questions either in chat, or if you'd like to come off mute and ask them by audio.
Yeah, Anna, can I ask? So
sure.
Yeah, brilliant. I think, and it will be great to pick up your suggestions around what your changes. So I've got a follow-on question on that. That one of the aspects you said where difference was in terms of attainment is around assessment, and I just wondered if you have uncovered some. I mean, I know the research is ongoing as well in terms of, but for instance, you mentioned dissertation differences. So is there anything around assessment that you're planning to do, or research, or?
None at the minute. I mean, the other thing we're actually looking at is we've got all the entry qualifications as well, because we need to try and at least get some sense of, if they're coming in at a lower level to start with, is it that just then continuing on, or what is it? But there's variations within each cohort as well. It's not as straightforward. I wouldn't expect it to be straightforward, but there's so much variation within people. But and from a perspective of trying to identify, right, this is the module we want to target, or this is the type of assessments we need to give support for, there's nothing obvious that's coming out. So like I say, the next step is looking at the entry criteria and seeing if that's more sort of linked to attainment throughout the program, and whether we need to target as a whole, irrespective of ethnicity, students are coming in at a lower level.
I mean, you interestingly said about, because assessment bunching and assessment concerns every student as well. So it was interesting that you're looking at religious festivals, in terms of the scheduling of the assessment. So that might make a difference as well. So very interesting. The only other thing, I mean, I don't want to hog the thing, but I just wanted to share, I went along the Dragons Den for the medical students, and one of the apps that the students had to design an app and you know, like a Dragon's Den type thing. And one of the apps that they came up with was exactly what you mentioned. So it was skin conditions for non-white people, because one of the students had that experience that her child's illness, you know, skin condition wasn't picked up because, you know, it wasn't. So I'm just going to post 2 pieces of AI on this in the chat, just as an out of interest of just resonating with what you said, but I'll let other people ask questions now. But thank you very much. Really interesting, really good project.
Thanks.
Pete.
Oh, hello. Thank you. That was really, really interesting. And it resonated with a piece of work we were looking at in radiotherapy related to radiotherapy skin reactions in non-white patients. And we recognise that, like you, that the students don't really get a chance to see images of radiotherapy reactions on non-white skins while training. But the bigger picture really is that the training materials offered by our profession are exactly the same. They're really good, but they're only focused on white skin. So really, I think we need to start to address that training issue in our profession. The things that people use clinically to assess skin reactions.
So there's from our perspective, the Orthoptics Society last year, for the first time ever, appointed an equality, diversity and inclusivity, I think, lead person. So there is a starting point there. So we've had some conversations with her as well. And so so it is, yeah, you're right. It's big picture, isn't it? It's not unique. This isn't unique to Orthoptics at Liverpool. This is big picture stuff in healthcare.
Yeah, and we've got an opportunity to drive the clinical developments there, which is exciting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Cheers.
That's great. Thank you. So, any further questions? Okay, well, in that case, it just remains for me to thank Anna for another fantastic session. It's really, really great to see what's going on in the university, and thank you for sharing that with us today.